Welcome to the Pursuit Chronicles, where tales of adventure, discovery, and passion unfold through every inspiring journey. The sun blazed over the Nevada desert, a relentless tyrant scorching the earth to a brittle crust. Federal Highway 50 stretched. Like a scar across the wasteland, its asphalt shimmering in the heat. No gas stations, no homes, no mercy, just red dust and the hum of cicadas, their song a mocking elegy. Temperatures soared past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of heat that could kill a man in hours, let alone a woman and child abandoned on the roadside. Clara Bennett lay slumped in the gravel, her cotton dress torn at the knees, her sunburned. Skin peeling like old paint, blood speckled her forehead, drying in the unrelenting sun. Beside her, 8-year-old Elliot was unconscious, his small chest rising and falling with shallow, ragged breaths. His arm, swollen and crusted with blood, twitched faintly. A tattered cloth bag sat nearby, its contents spilled. A cracked photo. Frame, a child's drawing, a nearly empty water bottle. Clara's hand clutched Elliot's, her cracked lips whispering, "Elliot, wake up! Please don't scare me! I'm begging you!" His lips were blue, his fingers still curled around the hem of her dress, as if hope lingered somewhere deep inside him. No one stopped. No one cared. The occasional truck roared past, tires humming, drivers averting their eyes. Clara's voice, faint as a desert breeze, was lost in the sand. She had no phone, no money, no strength left. Behind her, the wrought-iron gates of the Whitmore estate loomed, a cold monument to her rejection. Just hours ago she'd been dragged from a car, beaten and cast out like refuse by her late husband's family. They'd called her a liar, a thief, a murderer. They'd taken everything, her home, her dignity, her hope. All she had left was Elliot, and now even he was slipping away. From the estate's parlor, Beatrice Whitmore watched through tinted glass. Her white dress was pristine, her iced tea clinking with ice. Her face was a mask of indifference, neither angry nor sympathetic, just cold. "She doesn't belong here anymore," she said, her voice flat. Behind her, Percy Langston, the Whitmore. Family's financial advisor smirked. "Never did. Charles was a fool to marry her." His words dripped with venom, his eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a man who'd orchestrated her downfall. Clara didn't look up. She held Elliot tighter, as if her grip could tether him to life. The cicadas wailed like broken violins, and her heart trembled for the one thing she still had. Everything else, the accusations, the mansion, the judgment, meant nothing. If she could save her son, she could endure anything, just when hope had withered to ash, a dusty silver Ford. F-150 slowed to a stop. The engine rattled and the driver's window rolled down. Silas Whittemore, 41, squinted into the heat. A reclusive millionaire, he owned vast swaths of farmland and stakes in agricultural empires across the West. After losing his wife, Emily, and daughter, Annie, in a house fire 6 years ago, he'd retreated to a remote ranch, shunning society. He wasn't a man who stopped for strangers. Yet something, a memory, a pang in his chest, made him pull over. Silas stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel. He kept his distance, crouching slightly, his voice calm but steady. "The boy's got a fever. I have water in a truck. Let me help." Clara's eyes met his, wary, fierce, like a wounded wolf ready to snap. She didn't trust him, but she had no choice. Her strength was gone, her son's life fading. Silas opened a water bottle, set it on the ground a few feet away, and backed off, a gesture of respect that caught her off guard. No one from the Whitmore estate had ever treated her like a person. Clara glanced at Elliot, his breathing faint. Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, not out of trust, but surrender. Silas helped her lift Elliot into the truck's back seat, where she cradled his head, dabbing his sweat with a wet cloth Silas provided. The truck's interior smelled of old leather and antiseptic, a stark contrast to the opulent cruelty of the Whitmore estate. Silas didn't ask her name. He didn't need to. In the rearview mirror he saw a mother fighting for her child, and it stirred memories he'd buried deep. his daughter's eyes lost in smoke. "The town clinic's closed," he said quietly, "but I know someone. A retired Army medic. He'll come." Clara didn't respond, but her eyes softened, exhaustion giving way to a flicker of gratitude. The truck turned onto a dusty road winding toward Silas's ranch, the scent of dry grass and distant horses filling the air. The ranch emerged, white wooden fences, a 3-story brick house, aged but proud, standing like a sentinel against time. Clara awoke in the passenger seat, groggy, panic surging. "Where's Elliot?" she gasped. "In the back room. Safe," Silas replied from the kitchen. She rushed to a wooden guest room where Elliot lay in bed, a damp cloth on his forehead, his arm bandaged. A glass of water and a handwritten note, "Rest, don't worry," sat on the nightstand. Clara froze, stunned. No one had ever been this gentle with her, not with words, not with actions. She slid to the floor, leaning against the wall, and for the first time in months, she let herself breathe. In the kitchen, Silas stood alone, pouring coffee. He wasn't used to caring for others, but from the window he watched Clara tend to her son, wiping his forehead, breaking pills, holding him, like he was the entire world. Not everyone could mother like that. Something inside him shifted, a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. He didn't know her name, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Night fell over Hillside Ranch, the silence broken only by crickets and the rustle of wooden shutters. In the small guest room, Elliot remained feverish, his small body trembling. Clara sat beside him, her hands shaking as she changed the cloth on his forehead. She'd lost count of how many times she'd cried, but she knew if Elliot didn't survive, neither would she. Silas stood at the doorway, watching silently. The scene was hauntingly familiar, a mother refusing to leave her child's side, despite her own exhaustion. Clara glanced around the house, spacious yet empty. On a shelf, a polished photo frame held an image of a brunette woman and a little girl clutching a teddy bear. The same bear, worn and faded, sat on a nearby chair. Clara's voice was subdued. "I saw the photo of your family. Your wife and daughter are beautiful. Would they mind if we stayed tonight?" "I can leave if they would." Silas's gaze dropped. "They passed away. House fire. They were rescued, but the burns and smoke. They didn't make it." His voice was steady, but the pain was raw. Clara turned away, squeezing Elliot's hand, her eyes shifting from fear to empathy. A knock at the door broke the silence. Doc Horace Avery, a retired Army medic, entered with a medical bag. He'd cared for Silas's family in their final days. He examined Elliot, nodding at Clara's care. "You've done well. The boy will be fine, thanks to you." Clara bowed her head, gratitude catching in her throat. In the hallway, Doc Avery faced Silas, his voice low. "I thought you called about a horse, not a woman and child." Silas didn't respond. Doc pressed on. "I saw you nearly die with Emily and Annie, but now you're breathing again. She's not here to replace them. She's here to bring you back." Silas gripped his coat, his voice hoarse. "I don't know what to do with this." Doc's hand rested on his shoulder. "If you let the past drag you down again, no one will pull you out." Silas glanced at Clara, still holding her son's hand. His house, silent for years, echoed with human voices. For the first time, it didn't feel like an intrusion. Morning sunlight streamed through the ranch's thin curtains, casting a warm glow on aged furnishings. Clara stepped barefoot onto the cool wooden floor, observing the house, tidy yet lifeless. Each photo, each chalk mark on the wall, clung to a world long gone. In the kitchen, Silas brewed coffee, the aroma filling the air. He gestured to a kettle and bread. "Coffee's ready. Eggs in the oven. Help yourself." Clara poured a mug and sat across from him, the silence less strained than before. By midday, Mildred McLean, the sheriff's wife, arrived with a basket of pastries, apples, and honey. A former nurse, her kind eyes held no judgment. "Heard we have new folks. Not here to pry, just thought you shouldn't feel like a burden." Clara bowed her head. unaccustomed to kindness. Mildred poured tea and spoke calmly. I knew Silas's wife, Emily, and little Annie. After they passed, Silas didn't leave the ranch for a year. You're the first woman he's let in. Not out of pity, but something real. Clara clenched her hands. I'm just trying to survive, Mildred smiled. Sometimes those who don't see themselves as special help others keep going. 3 weeks passed. Shared meals, laundry cycles, and towels on the porch turned Clara and Elliot's stay into something permanent. Silas opened the barn, showing Clara a small saddle. Annie loved riding, called her horse Daisy, her best friend. Clara chuckled, noticing a faded cowboy hat on a peg. Silas's voice softened. I haven't shared that with anyone in 6 years. You're the first. In the silence, he felt safe, trusted, without explanation. Clara's smile returned, her wounds scabbing. Over. Silas began recounting memories of Emily and Annie, relearning how to share grief. The house, once silent, hummed with life, soups bubbling, laughter echoing. Under crimson sunsets, they didn't speak of sorrow, but their hearts opened, trust blossoming in shared moments. One afternoon, Elliot's laughter filled the kitchen. As Clara sliced bread, he asked, Mr. Silas, could you be my dad? The room froze. Clara stiffened, stroking his head. Elliot, don't say that. But Elliot pressed on. I want Mum to have someone, a good dad, not like Dad Charles who made her cry. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. She hadn't realized how closely her son watched her. Silas took Elliot's hand, leading him to a coloring table. There's better light here. Later, Dad will help you draw a horse. The word Dad made Elliot beam. Clara, flustered, murmured, I'm sorry. Silas smiled gently. It's okay. I'm glad he sees that in me. Something in Clara softened. Later, Silas asked, What happened? Why were you on the roadside? Clara took a deep breath, her story unfolding like a wound reopening. Charles, her cruel husband, manipulated finances, inflicted emotional abuse, and abandoned her. His family, led by Beatrice, blamed her for his death in a car accident, painting her as a cold, unfaithful wife. They dragged her from a car, beat her, and left her and Elliot on the roadside. No one helped, she whispered. Until you. Silas listened, a silent mirror reflecting her truth. Clara rested her head on her arm, tears falling. You saw me as a person, not a shadow. That saved me. The whispers began like a desert wind, subtle but relentless, stirring unease in the small town of Red Mesa. Clara Bennett, once a pariah collapsed on the roadside, had found refuge at Silas Whittemore's hillside ranch. For 3 weeks, the ranch had been a sanctuary, its white fences and aged brick house a quiet haven, where Clara and her son Elliot could heal. But peace, it seemed, was a fragile thing in a town where gossip was currency and old grudges festered like wounds. Beatrice Whitmore, the late Charles Whitmore's childhood friend and the family's self-appointed matriarch, reappeared in Red Mesa after weeks of silence. She moved through the town with her trademark nonchalance, sunglasses perched on her nose, a red dress clinging to her frame, her voice dripping with calculated charm. At the salon, the grocery store, the church, she left a trail of murmurs. Clara's been at Silas's ranch for weeks, alone, she'd say, her lips curling. Using her looks to trap a grieving man? Typical. Percy Langston, Charles's confidant and the Whitmore family's financial advisor, fueled the fire. She was Charles's wife, and now she's after Silas's fortune. You think that's love? It's a setup. The gossip spread like wildfire. Store clerks who once nodded politely now avoided Clara's gaze. At the pharmacy, a clerk turned away, pretending not to see her. The bakery owner tossed her receipt without a word. Children whispered behind cupped hands, and adults crossed the street to avoid her. One morning, a crude sign appeared outside the ranch's gate. Protect decent men from scheming women. Clara didn't react outwardly, but her eyes grew heavier, her steps slower. Elliot, now regaining his strength, began to notice. Mum, why don't people greet you anymore? Did you do something wrong? Clara squeezed his hand, forcing a smile. Some people don't need a reason to be unkind, sweetheart. Her heart, though, was breaking. She didn't know how to explain that malice thrived on opportunity, not truth. One crisp Saturday, Clara took Elliot to the town square, bustling with weekend shoppers to buy school supplies. She stepped into the general store cautiously, her eyes weary. Whispers followed her, sharp as thorns. Beatrice appeared, blocking her path, her red dress a stark contrast to the muted tones of the store. "This town's small, Clara," she said, her smile venomous. "Rumors spread faster than the wind. A few words and people remember who you are, a failure, a leech, exploiting a widower's pity." Clara's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "I've never forgotten who I am, Beatrice. But you seem afraid people might forget you, so you keep reminding them." Beatrice's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "You're nothing but a dependent, Clara. I'm just being objective." Clara met her gaze, unflinching. "If you truly believed you were right, you wouldn't need to perform in public?" The crowd fell silent, tension crackling like static. Elliot clutched his mother's hand, whispering, "Are you okay, Mum?" Clara knelt, brushing his hair. "I'm okay because I know I haven't done anything wrong." Beatrice turned away, her shadow lingering over the market's tense air. Clara stepped outside, head high, not with arrogance, but as a mother determined to shield her son from lies. Yet the encounter left a mark, a reminder that the Whitmore family's influence ran deep, and their vengeance was far from spent. Finn. Morgan, a 28-year-old journalist from Chicago, arrived in Red Mesa with a worn notebook, a camera, and a reputation for uncovering truths buried by power. He'd heard whispers of Clara's story, a single mother slandered, a town divided, a wealthy family's secrets. Intrigued, he checked into a modest motel on the edge of town and began asking questions. His tousled hair and dusty shoes belied a sharp mind and an unshakable sense of justice. Finn first met Clara at the ranch, where she was hanging laundry, her hands still damp with soapy water. Silas stood nearby, repairing a fence, his eyes wary of the stranger. Finn introduced himself, his voice calm but direct. "I've heard the rumors, but I don't write based on hearsay. I want your story, the truth." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "If it can help someone else avoid being misunderstood, I'll share." Over coffee in the ranch's kitchen, she recounted her ordeal: Charles's abuse, the Whitmore family's betrayal, the roadside abandonment. Finn listened, scribbling notes by hand, his trust evident in his refusal to record. Next, Finn visited Silas, who was initially guarded. "I don't talk to reporters," Silas said, his voice gruff, but Finn's sincerity wore him down. "I'm not here to exploit you. I'm here to set things right." Silas shared fragments of his own story, his loss, his solitude, and the land deal years ago that cost him 40 acres of hayfields orchestrated by Charles and Percy. Finn's instincts flared. There was more to this than gossip. At the county legal office, Finn pored over land records and investment files. What he uncovered was explosive. Charles Whitmore and Percy Langston had forged a land transfer, swindling Silas out of valuable property. Clara had no knowledge of the deal, but the Whitmores had used her as a scapegoat, painting her as complicit to deflect suspicion. Finn didn't stop there. He tracked down a former Whitmore accountant, now living in Reno, who confirmed Percy's role in manipulating Charles's trust funds for shady investments. The accountant, fearing retaliation, spoke on condition of anonymity but provided documents that tied Percy to financial fraud. Finn met Clara again at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, rain pattering against the windows. He placed his notebook on the table. "I've got evidence, forged contracts, witness statements. This isn't just about clearing your name. It's about exposing a web of corruption." Clara's eyes widened. "You believe me?" Finn nodded. "I don't just believe you. I'm going to make sure the truth has a voice." He shook her hand, his resolve unwavering. "This isn't just for an article. I'll see it through." Clara's next step was bold. She visited Sheriff Amos McLean at the Red Mesa police station, a squat brick building with faded American and Nevada flags out front. Amos, a tall man in his 50s with a deep voice and seasoned eyes, had known Charles and trusted the Whitmore family's narrative. Complaints from townsfolk loyal to the Whitmores had painted Clara as a troublemaker. Yet Clara stood before him, unafraid, placing a file on his desk. Elliot's medical report, handwritten accounts of the roadside assault, and threatening messages from Beatrice. "I have nothing to lose except my son," she said, her voice earnest. "I need you to know the truth." Amos hesitated. Clara's past made him skeptical, and Silas's involvement raised questions. But Finn's arrival changed the equation. The journalist dropped off a folder, copies of forged contracts, the accountant's statement, and a power of attorney Charles had signed to legitimize the land seizure behind Silas's back. "She didn't deceive anyone," Finn said. "The deceiver's dead, and the living are guarding his secrets." That evening Amos sat at his kitchen table, the light casting shadows on his weathered face. Mildred, his wife, set down a cup of tea and met his gaze. "You swore an oath for justice." "Amos, justice doesn't side with rumors." The next morning, Amos pinned on his badge and drove to the ranch, not to interrogate, but to listen. Clara opened the door, her eyes tired but fearless. For the first time, someone in uniform stood on the side of truth. Clara's resolve hardened. She returned to the police station days later, her steps resolute. This time she brought more than Finn's documents. She'd gathered her own evidence, photos from the day of Charles's accident, showing skid marks. Inconsistent with the official report, voicemails from Beatrice laced with threats, testimony from a former Whitmore housekeeper, located through a women's charity network, who'd witnessed Beatrice's orders to erase Clara from the family's records. Clara also produced voice recordings she'd saved, her only shield against doubt. "Years of silence. I can't let my son grow up thinking his mother gave up," she told Amos, her gaze unwavering. "I won't let lies rewrite my story." Amos studied her for a long moment, then nodded, not out of pity, but respect. Clara wasn't asking for protection, she was reclaiming her truth. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Percy escalated their campaign. At a town hall meeting, Percy addressed a crowd of locals, his silver cane gleaming under the lights. "Clara Bennett is a danger to this community," he declared. "She's manipulated Silas Whittemore, a vulnerable man, and now she's spreading lies to tarnish the Whitmore legacy," the crowd murmured, some nodding, others uncertain. Beatrice, seated in the front row, clapped slowly, her sunglasses hiding her eyes. But cracks were forming. Ruby May, the 17-year-old neighbor who helped Clara tend the ranch's garden, overheard the speech and confronted her parents. "Clara's not what they say. She's kind, and Elliot's like my little brother. Why are people lying?" Her father, a local mechanic, frowned. "The Whitmores have money, Ruby. Money buys stories." Ruby's defiance spread, inspiring others to question the narrative. One evening, Silas sat in the ranch's living room, lit only by an oil lamp. In his hands was a photo of Emily and Annie, smiling on a sunny day. He spoke softly, as if they could hear. "Can I help her and her son? Elliot calls me Dad. Would that make you sad?" He sighed, eyes fixed on the frame. "I can't turn away when I see someone falling, like I did." Closing his eyes, he felt a warmth, as if Emily's voice whispered, "You're not alone anymore, Silas." One afternoon, as Clara gathered laundry from the clothesline, a mail truck rumbled up the dirt road. She opened the weathered mailbox, finding a thick envelope sealed with red wax, bearing the Shady Valley County Court's seal. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. The words struck like a blade. "Petition for custody of Elliot Bennett. Filed. By Vivian Whitmore, mother of the late Charles Whitmore. Grounds, Clara Bennett deemed unfit to provide a stable environment." Clara stood frozen, the letter crumpling in her grip. She turned to the house where Elliot napped on the sofa, crayons scattered beside him. Sitting beside him, she pressed her lips to his forehead, whispering, "I've been running all my life, but this time I won't back down." Her hand rested over her heart, its steady beat fueling her resolve. She was no longer the woman. Abandoned by the roadside, she would fight, Silas watched from the doorway, his coat dusty from the stables. He saw the letter on the table, his jaw tightening. No words were needed. In Clara's held breath, in Elliot's small form, a silent pact formed. No one would fall again, and no one would stand alone. The Shady Valley County Courthouse, a squat, limestone building in the heart of Red Mesa, loomed as the battleground. Clara prepared meticulously, gathering evidence over sleepless nights, a psychological evaluation proving her stability, Elliot's medical records, journals detailing her care, letters from teachers praising her dedication. Finn continued his investigation, uncovering audio recordings of Beatrice instructing staff to reclaim everything once Clara lost custody. He also secured a bombshell, Charles's accident report, showing he was speeding at 110 miles per hour, arguing with a mistress, not Clara, via Bluetooth with no brake marks. Silas, too, prepared. He met with Doc Avery, who offered to testify to Clara's care for Elliot. Mildred rallied the community, urging neighbors to see past the gossip. Ruby May circulated a petition supporting Clara, collecting signatures from families whose children Clara had tutored. The ranch, once a place of solitude, buzzed with allies united by a shared belief in truth. As the court date neared, Beatrice and Percy grew desperate. Percy hired a private investigator to dig into Clara's past, hoping to unearth scandals. The investigator found nothing but a woman who'd endured years of abuse with quiet strength. Beatrice, meanwhile, leaned on her socialite connections, pressuring local officials to sway the case, but Finn's articles, published in a regional paper, began to shift public opinion, exposing the Whitmore's fraud and rallying support for Clara. On the eve of the trial, Clara stood on the ranch's porch, the desert sky ablaze with stars. Silas joined her, handing her a glass of water. "You're not alone in this," he said. Clara's eyes met his, unguarded for the first time. "I used to think I didn't deserve help, but you've shown me I'm worth fighting for." Silas nodded, his hand brushing hers. "You've always been worth it, Clara. You just needed someone to see it." The Shady Valley County Courthouse stood like a weathered monument in Red Mesa's heart, its limestone facade baking under the Nevada sun. Inside, the air was heavy with anticipation, the wooden benches creaking under the weight of townsfolk, reporters, and curious onlookers. Clara Bennett entered the courtroom with her hair neatly tied, her face composed, her eyes clear, not with confidence, but with the unyielding resolve of a mother armed with truth. Across the room, Beatrice. Whitmore sat in a tailored gray suit, her lips painted a muted red, her posture rigid as if she commanded the stage. Behind her, Percy Langston leaned on a silver cane, his expensive suit unable to mask the smug glint in his eyes. The plaintiff's attorney, a sharp-eyed man hired by Vivian Whitmore, Charles's mother, opened with a barrage of accusations. Clara Bennett lacks a permanent residence, holds no steady employment, and has a history of instability, he declared, his voice echoing. "She cohabits with Silas Whittemore, a man of undefined legal standing, in a reckless and irresponsible environment for a child." The words stung, but Clara didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, whispers in the market, slurs on signs. She stood, presenting her evidence with the precision of someone who'd spent sleepless nights preparing. A psychological evaluation confirming her mental stability, Elliot's medical records detailing her meticulous care, handwritten journals, chronicling daily routines, meals cooked, fevers nursed, bedtime stories read. Letters from former teachers attested to her presence at every parent-teacher meeting, even when she had to walk miles to get there. Her voice was firm, though soft. "If being a mother means refusing to run, I've done that. If it means standing by your child when no one else will, I've done that too. And if it means never letting go, even when deemed unworthy, I have never let go." The courtroom fell. Silent, her words cutting through the attorney's rhetoric like a blade, then Finn Morgan took the stand, his investigative notebook in hand. The young journalist from Chicago, with his tousled hair and unassuming demeanor, commanded attention not with flair, but with facts. "I request to expand the discussion beyond finances to matters of criminal and ethical concern," he said. His voice steady, he presented evidence that stunned the room, Charles Whitmore's accident report showing he was driving at 110 miles per hour, arguing with a mistress, not Clara, via Bluetooth, with no brake marks. Audio recordings revealed Beatrice instructing staff to exclude Clara from the family will, change safe combinations, and destroy Charles's letters. Forged land contracts exposed Percy and Charles's scheme to defraud Silas of 40 acres, with Beatrice's complicity. Most damning was a recorded conversation where Beatrice said, "Once Clara loses custody, I'll reclaim everything rightfully." Ours. The courtroom buzzed, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. Beatrice's face drained of color, her hands gripping the bench. Percy began to sweat, his cane tapping nervously. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as Finn handed over federal investigative documents. These revealed Percy's use of Charles's trust funds for money laundering through third-party assets, including the stolen land. Government representatives in the room confirmed Percy faced federal charges for financial fraud, forgery of notarized documents, and conspiracy to manipulate inheritance assets. Silas Whitmore's testimony sealed the case. He approached the stand with steady steps, dressed in a simple flannel shirt and jeans, exuding the aura of a man who'd built his life with his own hands. "I am Silas Whitmore, legal owner of a 2,400-acre ranch in Red Mesa, debt-free, with assets exceeding $30 million, he began, prompting murmurs from the crowd. "But I'm not here because of wealth. I'm here for a boy named Elliot, who once called me uncle and now calls me dad. I haven't replaced anyone. I've simply done what a father should, protect a child from those unworthy." He turned, his gaze to Beatrice and Percy. "The plaintiffs claim Clara is unfit based on what they are guilty of: financial fraud, contract manipulation, and attempts to strip a single mother of her rights. Clara may lack wealth, but she possesses courage and kindness I haven't seen in years. Elliot called me dad. I don't need legal validation for that. But today, I demand justice be served." His voice, though calm, carried the weight of a man who'd lost everything once and refused to let it happen again. Mildred McLean, the sheriff's wife, spoke last, without notes, her words from the heart. "Clara survived not by luck, but through kindness. I've never seen anyone hold on to their child with such determination. If Clara isn't fit to be a mother, then no one is." Her voice trembled, but her gaze was unwavering, a testament to the community's growing support. The judge deliberated briefly, her decision swift and resolute. "The court rules that Clara Bennett shall remain the sole legal guardian of Elliot Bennett. Silas Whitmore, possessing the requisite financial stability, moral character, and responsibility, is recognized as the legal stepfather. The plaintiff's petition is dismissed. State and federal authorities will continue criminal investigations into Percy Langston and associated parties." Beatrice and Vivian Whitmore sat stunned, their faces ashen. Percy's smug demeanor crumbled as federal agents handcuffed him, his cane clattering to the floor. His escape plans, rumored to involve offshore accounts, were thwarted by Finn's relentless digging. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of justice settling like dust after a storm. Clara's knees buckled, but before she hit the floor, Silas surged forward, catching her in his arms. His strong arm wrapped around her back, his hand cradling her neck as if she might vanish. She hadn't fainted. She exhaled, her body releasing years of burden. Looking up at Silas, her eyes rimmed with red but dry, she whispered, "I did it. I didn't give up. For the first time I stood up for myself, for Elliot." Silas nodded, his hand squeezing her shoulder, his silence more eloquent than words. Elliot sprinted from the back row, throwing himself into their embrace. The three held each other tightly, surrounded by onlookers who watched not with pity, but with honor. This was no longer just a legal proceeding. It was the moment a single mother reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her chance to love again. As the trial concluded, a gentle rain fell over Red Mesa, its scent mingling with wild grass, as if cleansing. The past. On the drive back to the ranch, Clara sat beside Silas, her back straight, her hand holding Elliot's as he slept on her lap. This silence wasn't born of worry, but of newfound peace. Motherhood had once bowed her head, taught her to avoid confrontation. Now she gazed out the window, her eyes tracing the horizon, unafraid. Dinner that evening was a shared effort, not out of obligation, but joy. Silas wiped down the stove, Elliot washed vegetables, and Clara sautéed a meal, her movements fluid, unguarded. For the first time, she didn't hide her emotions when looking at Silas. Her gaze was direct, sincere, the look of a woman who'd learned to live authentically. After dinner, Silas emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of red wine, a cashmere sweater draped over his shoulders. He handed one to Clara, his eyes calm. Not to get drunk, just to remember we're still alive. Clara accepted the glass, but didn't drink. She looked at him, her voice softening. I used to think love was a luxury, like beautiful houses or dresses I never dared touch. But true love doesn't come from someone with something to offer. It comes from someone willing to sit beside you when you have nothing. Silas set his glass on the windowsill, nodding. I have everything, land, shares, money, but for 6 years I lived in a 4,000-square-foot house where no one asked if I'd eaten. Since you arrived, this house feels alive. Clara's eyes glistened, not from the wine, but from the weight of his words. I'm afraid of love, because it's where people hurt each other most. But now I understand. True love is about finding someone who sits beside you when you're broken and doesn't walk away. Silas stepped closer, extending his hand, a calm, steady gesture, not a proposal but a promise. Clara placed her hand in his, a sense of safety washing over her. Not from wealth, but from being seen as she was. They sat by the fireplace, the crackling wood the only sound. There was no kiss, no grand gesture, just 2 people, once shattered, finding solace in each other. Clara rested her head on Silas's shoulder, whispering, You didn't save me. You reminded me I deserved to keep living. Silas squeezed her shoulder, his gaze softening. And you made me believe this house needs laughter, not another painting. The trial's fallout rippled through Red Mesa. Percy Langston's arrest made headlines, his financial empire crumbling under federal scrutiny. Beatrice, stripped of her influence, retreated to the Whitmore estate, her socialite facade cracking. Vivian Whitmore, Charles's mother, sent a letter of apology through a courier, unable to face Clara herself. I was wrong to judge you, it read. I hope you can forgive me. Clara read it silently, then set it aside. Not to forgive, but to release the burden. The town began to shift. Elsie Tate, the tailor who'd once shunned Clara, arrived at the ranch with a roll of hand-embroidered fabric, her eyes soft with remorse. No words were spoken, but the gesture was clear. Others followed. Neighbors brought casseroles, children waved at Elliot, and the pharmacy clerk apologized with a free bottle of vitamins. Clara smiled, not because people had changed, but because she was no longer defined by their judgments. Ruby May, the 17-year-old neighbor, became a fixture at the ranch, helping Clara with chores and playing with Elliot. Her parents, once swayed by Whitmore money, now invited Clara to Sunday dinners. Mildred McLean visited weekly, her homemade bread a symbol of steadfast support. Even Sheriff Amos, once skeptical, tipped his hat when he saw Clara in town, a quiet acknowledgement of her strength, but not all wounds healed easily. One afternoon, Beatrice appeared at the ranch, unannounced, her dress wrinkled, her eyes sunken, no bodyguards, no sunglasses, just a woman facing the wreckage of her choices. I was wrong, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I was jealous of how Charles looked at you. I let envy make me cruel. I'm sorry for pushing you and Elliot out. Clara stood silent, Elliot clutching her shirt. After a long pause, she nodded. Not to absolve, but to let go of the final weight in her heart. Weeks later, Silas drove Clara and Elliot to a small cemetery atop a hill, behind old pine trees. 2 white stone graves rested side by side. Emily and Annie Whitmore. Silas knelt, removing his hat, his gaze lingering on the engraved names. I found someone worthy, Emily, he said, his voice choked. Someone brave, who doesn't give up. I can place your hand in hers, and you won't worry anymore. Clara stood quietly, feeling not like an intruder, but a companion welcomed by her own strength. Silas turned to her, opening his palm to reveal a simple platinum ring. "The old ring I left with Emily for days gone by. This is for the days to come if you're ready." Clara nodded, her eyes saying what words couldn't. "I'm ready, not because I'm loved, but because I want to love again." She stepped forward, holding Elliot's hand, and faced the tombstones. "I can't replace you," she said, her voice firm. "But if you're watching, I hope you're at peace. I'll be there for Silas and protect Elliot for the rest of our lives." Elliot squeezed her hand, looking at the photo on Annie's grave, a girl smiling with her parents. "I'll take care of Dad," he whispered. "He won't be lonely anymore." The breeze rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of lavender as if the past blessed their future. Their wedding took place in the ranch's garden, where spring had turned barren land green. Ruby May picked wildflowers, Mildred baked a towering cake, and Finn Morgan snapped photos, his camera capturing moments of joy. Elliot, in a custom-made suit, darted around, arranging storybooks he'd crafted for guests. "Today my mom is marrying Dad Silas," he shouted. "I have a real family, like in stories, but this is true." Clara watched her son, tears streaming down her face, not from sorrow, but from a mending heart. For the first time, she saw herself as a happy woman, not a survivor clinging to scraps. Reverend Elijah Burns, the town's elderly pastor, officiated, his silver hair glinting in the sun. "No one lives forever in the past," he said, placing his hands on their heads, "but those who move forward with gratitude find a peaceful place to return to. You're not marrying to begin, but to continue what your hearts already know." As vows were exchanged, Clara looked at Silas, her voice steady. "I promise to stand by you, not because I need saving, but because I choose you." Silas's eyes softened. "And I promise to be your home, not just a shelter, but a place where you're always enough." Elliot, holding the rings, beamed, his small hands steady with pride. The June sun rose over Hillside Ranch, now affectionately called Sunrise Ranch, casting a golden glow across the Nevada desert. The red brick house, once a silent refuge for Silas Whittemore's grief, hummed with life. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, mingling with the sizzle of bacon and the patter of small footsteps. Clara Bennett, now Clara Whittemore, stood at the stove, her hair tied back, a simple long dress swaying as she flipped pancakes. Elliot, 10 years old and brimming with energy, set the table, his chatter filling the air. Silas cradled a 6-month-old baby girl Grace in his arms, her ash-gray eyes, a mirror of his late wife Emily's, sparkling in the morning light. 2 years had passed since the courtroom battle that restored Clara's custody of Elliot and exposed the Whitmore family's corruption. The trial had been a turning point, not just for Clara and Silas, but for Red Mesa itself. The town, once swayed by Beatrice Whitmore's influence and Percy Langston's money, had begun to heal, its people learning to question gossip and value truth. Clara, once a pariah, was now a quiet pillar of the community, her resilience a beacon for those who'd been overlooked. Clara's greatest legacy was the Whitmore Community School, housed in a converted tool shed on the ranch. Every morning, she stood before a blackboard teaching nearly 20 children, mostly from working-class families or those who'd never had proper schooling. Her lessons went beyond letters and numbers. She taught resilience, kindness, and the courage to rise after a fall. "Today we'll learn to write," she'd say, her smile warm. "But more importantly, we'll learn to stand up even when the world pushes you down." The school was a labor of love, funded by Silas's resources and Clara's determination. Ruby May, now 19 and studying agricultural science at Texas State University, returned during breaks to help her bond with Clara unbreakable. Mildred McLean, the sheriff's wife, volunteered weekly, bringing books and her gentle wisdom. Even Finn Morgan, the journalist who'd uncovered the Whitmore fraud, sent donations from Chicago, his articles about the school inspiring regional support. One crisp morning, Clara hung a wooden sign on the ranch's gate, Whitmore Community School. Silas stood on the porch, Grace nestled in his arms, watching her. "You know," he said, his voice soft, Your mum's the strongest woman I've ever met, not because she's fearless, but because she faces her fears and forgives. Grace cooed, her tiny hand grasping his finger as if in agreement. Elliot dashed out, clutching a stack of handwritten stories. Dad, Mum, I'm entering my story in a contest. Finn says writing from the heart is enough. Clara embraced him, and Silas wrapped his arms around them both, the family standing strong beneath the western sun. Elliot's latest story, The Man Who Planted Grass But Grew a Family, was a tribute to Silas. He printed it, tucked it into a folder, and handed it to Clara. I want Dad to read it first. He's the main character. Silas, now officially Elliot's father, took the pages, his eyes misty. You're making me sound like a hero, kid, he said, ruffling Elliot's hair. But your mum's the real one. Elliot grinned, his confidence a testament to the love that had rebuilt him. Grace, named not by chance but as a promise to Emily, was a bridge between past and future. Her ash-gray eyes held Emily's spirit, while her determined brow echoed Clara's strength. Clara often joked, she's the bridge between the two women you've loved, Silas, and will always love. Silas would nod, his gaze softening. She's more than that. She's proof we can keep going, not just exist. Grace's presence filled the ranch with new rhythms, late-night feedings, soft lullabies, and the patter of tiny feet as she began to crawl. She was a gift, a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence once filled with sorrow. One evening, as Clara rocked Grace to sleep, Silas stood in the doorway, watching. I used to think love only happened once, he said. But you and Elliot, now Grace, you've shown me it's not about replacing. It's about building something new, Clara smiled, her eyes glistening. And you've shown me love isn't about being perfect. It's about being there no matter what. Their bond, unspoken but profound, had grown through shared meals, quiet evenings, and the daily choice to trust again. Red Mesa continued to change. Percy Langston, sentenced to 5 years for financial fraud and defamation, was a fading memory, his once powerful name met with indifference. Beatrice Whitmore, humbled by her fall, lived quietly at the edge of town, her socialite days over. She'd sent Clara a second letter, longer this time, detailing her regret and offering to fund a scholarship for the community school. Clara accepted, not out of forgiveness, but to ensure Beatrice's wealth served a purpose beyond vanity. The townsfolk, too, made amends. Elsie Tate, the tailor, became a regular at the school, teaching sewing to the children. The pharmacy clerk, once cold, now greeted Clara with warmth, slipping extra crayons into Elliot's bag. Neighbors who'd once whispered now invited the family to barbecues, their children playing with Elliot in the ranch's yard. Sheriff Amos McLean, now a staunch ally, organized a community watch to protect the school, his badge a symbol of justice restored. Ruby May's success inspired others. Her acceptance into Texas State University had been a turning point, and she credited Clara's belief in her. You saw something in me when I was just a kid helping with the garden, she told Clara, tears in her eyes. Now I'm studying to make this land better because of you. Mildred, hugging them both, added, just like Clara did when no one believed in her. Ruby's visits to the ranch were filled with laughter, her stories of college life a reminder that kindness could ripple outward, changing lives beyond the desert, but peace was never guaranteed. One autumn afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the ranch, its tinted windows gleaming. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, introducing himself as Victor Hargrove, a lawyer representing a distant Whitmore cousin, Lionel. Hargrove claimed Lionel had unearthed a codicil to Charles Whitmore's will, allegedly entitling him to a portion of Silas's land, including the ranch itself. This isn't personal, Mrs. Whitmore, Hargrove said, his smile cold. It's business. The Whitmore estate believes you've profited unduly from their legacy. Clara's heart sank, but her resolve held firm. Silas, overhearing, stepped forward, his voice steady. This ranch is mine, debt-free, and no forged paper will change that. You want to fight? You'll get one. Hargrove left, promising to return with legal documents, but his visit cast a shadow over the ranch. Claire and Silas knew the Whitmores. Greed hadn't died with Percy's conviction. It had merely found a new face. Finn Morgan, alerted by Clara, returned to Red Mesa, his investigative instincts reignited. He dug into Lionel Whitmore's background, uncovering ties to a shady real estate syndicate eyeing Nevada's agricultural land for development. The codicil, Finn suspected, was another forgery crafted to exploit Silas's wealth. With Sheriff Amos's help, Finn accessed county records, confirming the document's inconsistencies, dates that didn't align, signatures that wavered. He also found a witness, a former Whitmore lawyer, now retired in Carson City, who admitted to being pressured by Lionel to draft fraudulent papers years ago. Clara, unwilling to be a victim again, rallied the community. She organized a town meeting at the school, her voice clear as she addressed neighbors, parents, and allies. This isn't just about our ranch, it's about protecting what we've built together, a place where truth matters more than money. The crowd, once divided, stood united, pledging support. Ruby May, home for the weekend, designed flyers, while Mildred mobilized local businesses to boycott Lionel's syndicate. Elliot, now a confident 10-year-old, wrote a letter to the local paper titled "Why Our Ranch Matters," which Finn published, stirring public outrage. The legal battle was swift. In a follow-up hearing, Finn presented the forged codicil's evidence, backed by the retired lawyer's testimony. The judge, the same stern woman from Clara's custody case, dismissed Lionel's claim, warning him of perjury charges. Hargrove, humiliated, left town, and Lionel's syndicate abandoned its plans, unable to withstand Red Mesa's resistance. The ranch was safe, but the victory was more than legal. It was a testament to the family's unbreakable spirit and the community's newfound strength. 10 years later, on May 12, 2035, Elliot Bennett Whittemore sat in the east-facing room of Sunrise Ranch, a lavender pot on the windowsill, just as Clara always kept it. Now 28, a published author and teacher at the community school, he typed a letter. On an old laptop, the scent of waffles wafting from the kitchen below. His wife, Lily, brewed coffee, and their daughter, little Clara, practiced spelling nearby. The letter, addressed to his mother, was a reflection on their journey, a tribute to the woman who'd saved him. Dear Mum, today I sit in the room where you taught me to dream, watching sunlight stream through the curtains. The scent of waffles reminds me of childhood mornings when you'd cook despite having nothing but love to give. My wife's brewing. Coffee, little Clara's spelling courage with her crayons. And you? You're still you. The woman who taught me family isn't where you're born, but where you're loved. I'm writing not for a special occasion, but because there's so much I need to say. Things I was too young to understand then and too shy to express later. At 8, I saw people call you a burden, a homewrecker, a stain. They saw me as a mistake. They didn't know their prejudice nearly broke us. You didn't shout or fight. Back. You held me close, wiped my fevers, cleaned Silas's house with blistered hands and said, I'm okay, as long as you're breathing. I didn't get why you stayed silent. Now I know. You chose kindness, and kind people don't need to scream to be heard. When I went to school, I was the boy whose mum lost everything, who lay on the roadside like a beggar. But I wasn't ashamed, because at home, I saw you teaching. Me to spell with tattered books, mending shirts with a broken needle, cooking porridge from garden yams, and still smiling. You said, we may lack many things, but never character. At 18, when I got into college for literature, you sold your sewing machine, your only wedding gift, to buy me a laptop. Don't write my life as a tragedy, you said. Write it as proof. I did, and today at the school's 10-year reunion, I read my first essay about you. My mother was cast out from a kind world, but she built a kinder one. Grace, my little sister, is 10 now, as mischievous as I was. When I ask who she loves most, she hugs you and says, Mum, because she's a superhero who saved the world. She's right. You saved our world. Mine, Silas's, Grace's, and every child who learns under your school's roof. I was once a boy left on the roadside, but today I'm a man standing in the sun, head high, because of you. I used to fear losing you, terrified someone would take you away like they tried. Now, I'm not afraid because you taught me self-respect, kindness, and the courage to not be a victim, even when hurt. If someone asks who I aspire to be, I'll say, a mother like mine, even as a man. Thank you, not just for being my mother, but for being the soul who believed truth always finds its voice. Your son who bears your name and is proud of it, Elliot. Bennett Whittemore Elliot folded the letter, placing it in a wooden frame beside a photo of Clara smiling outside the school. Clara, now in her 40s, sat on a bench, knitting a scarf for winter. Silas, graying but strong, held a cup of tea beside her. The ranch, once a shelter, was a true home, its walls echoing with love. No one spoke of the courtroom or the past, but their hearts held the truth. Kindness had saved them, resilience had guided them, and truth, though buried, had prevailed. Sunrise. Ranch grew, its school expanding to 2 buildings, serving over 50 children. Clara trained local teachers, her methods spreading to neighboring towns. Elliot published a novel, The Roadside Light, dedicated to his mother, which became a regional bestseller. Grace, a bright and curious girl, wrote poems about the desert, her words capturing the beauty of a land once harsh. Silas, no longer a recluse, mentored young farmers, sharing his land's bounty. One spring morning, Clara stood before the school, addressing a new class. Life doesn't promise fairness, she said, her voice steady, but it gives you a choice, to rise after you fall. Choose kindness, choose truth, and you'll light the way for others. The children listened, their eyes wide, knowing. They were part of something bigger, a community reborn from one woman's courage. As the years passed, Red Mesa became a symbol of redemption, its story told in articles, books, and Elliot's lectures. Clara and Silas grew old together there. Love a quiet constant, like the desert's enduring sun. Grace and little Clara carried their legacy, proof that from old wounds a new world could grow. Thank you for joining the Pursuit Chronicles. Keep chasing your dreams and explore new horizons with us.